Phragmites australis, Phrag, Phragmites, or even freakin' Phrag if you're feeling it. Whatever you call it, this invasive species is a menace to North American wetlands, particularly to my Great Salt Lake wetlands. Phragmites is a large perennial grass found in wetlands across the world. It can grow up to 5 meters tall, and because it is perennial, it can resprout year after year from its roots, just like your lawn, but far more terrible. The stems of Phragmites are more than a centimeter in diameter, thick enough to be used as spears, literally. Those stems can grow so dense that nothing, not light or ducks or people, can get through. And the leaves, big leaves with more silica than the average grass. Silica is the stuff that glass is made of, so they can actually slice you, much like a paper cut, but thicker and driven by spite. A single flowering Phragmites stem can produce hundreds or thousands of airborne seeds every year, which can then germinate into new invaders if they find the right conditions. If ideal conditions can't be found, Phragmites can also just reproduce vegetatively via parts called stolons and rhizomes. This is also called clonal growth and is part of the secret to Phragmites' success. It can literally clone itself again and again. Altogether, this means that Phragmites can find its way into many wetlands and suck up all the available light, nutrients, and water before other, nicer plants are able to. Very rapid growth and multiple reproductive strategies also means that Phragmites is almost impossible to kill. The Phragmites I'm talking about here is native to Europe, where it is valued for habitat, scenery, and even roofing. We have a native North American Phragmites, it's Phragmites australis subspecies americanus, which grows in wetlands and riparian areas across the continent. It is beautiful and plays nicely with others. The invasive strain, on the other hand, pushes out native, more desirable plant species from North American marshes. The invasive strain is what I'm talking about here. Phragmites probably got to the U.S. via shipping a few centuries ago, as it made handy and easily disposable packing material. Phragmites thrives on disturbance. It likes to establish itself on bare ground, for example, on scored ground after flooding or ice damage, on new road cuts, or in dredge piles. Once seedlings surpass about 15 centimeters in height, they can survive basically anything from there on out. Within just a few years, an isolated patch of Phragmites can expand outward with stolons that run along the soil surface and rhizomes below the soil. Each green to yellow colored spot you see here is an expanding patch of Phragmites near the lake. Eventually, it will probably all grow into one gigantic monotypic or single species ocean of Phrag. The flooding of the Great Salt Lake in the mid-'80s, followed by drought, compounded by water management and a plethora of roads in or near our wetlands, have given ample opportunities for invasive Phragmites to be introduced to the lake and take off. Once established as a stand, Phragmites can survive anything: flooding, drought, poisoning, fire, mowing and grazing, and even hexes and curses. But we'll get to that later. Phragmites is an ecosystem engineer, a plant capable of transforming the environment it is part of. More than pushing out native species, Phragmites changes the structure of a wetland. My initial efforts to capture how awful Phrag is involved dragging a GoPro through the stand of Phragmites. It's only 15 meters across, but that crossing took me 3 minutes. Included in that effort was pushing, pulling, sitting, and climbing. All seen here in excerpt, because the whole slog created a lot of motion sickness inducing video. A little bit of Phragmites adds some nice structural diversity and hiding spots within large, flat wetlands. But the scale that we find Phragmites on around the lake leads to Phragmites replacing healthy, productive habitat with acres of impenetrable weeds. Inside Phragmites, the only birds to be found are secretive marsh birds like soras and rails. Really, though, you're unlikely to actually find much of anything, as ending up in the middle of a Phrag patch is more likely to disorient and discombobulate you. This has led to a lot of hunters and their dogs, and a few scientists being lost out in the Phrag. Because Phragmites grows so large and fast and comes back year after year, it actually raises the surface of the marsh, potentially drying it out. However, because a lot of that growth is clonal and thus connected, the dry parts of the patch can get water through shared stems from the parts of the patch in wet places, a function called clonal integration that effectively makes Phragmites invincible. This isn't all bad news, though. The large growth and integrated root system means that Phragmites can also stabilize shorelines and sequester a lot of carbon. In its native range, particularly in Western Europe, the decline in Phragmites and its associated functions have been really problematic. Any potential benefits aside, we're trying to get rid of Phragmites here in Utah. A number of options are available for Phrag eradication, from herbicides to physical removal. By far, the most common strategy is the application of glyphosate, which effectively kills the Phrag for a year or two. Unfortunately, the standing dead stems prevent light from reaching the ground and stimulating the growth of native species. And often, small parts of the root system remain alive, so within a few years, the Phragmites comes rip-roaring back. Some of the brightest minds I know are working to figure out how we can best manipulate the environment, the timing of treatment, and removal of standing biomass with marsh mowers in order to improve the odds of success. They're also working on how we can remove Phrag while creating opportunities for good native species to come back. Burning, grazing, and crushing are other strategies being pursued in our region to varying degrees of success. Removing Phragmites through a large fire could potentially restore a whole lot of habitat, but the smoke produced would create a lot of problems for the already impaired air quality around the Wasatch Front, so the only recent large fires are those that were started illegally. But look at how great that land looks. If you can fence cattle in with a lot of Phragmites, they'll eat it and can take down a good deal of all the standing biomass that prevents native species from coming back, following more conventional Phragmites treatments. I don't know what to feel about this particular grazing management strategy because I personally don't like cows. I don't trust anything that can poop and walk at the same time. But I've seen the way that the cows can pack on the pounds while grazing in the marsh, so I'm excited to see what the research shows on this new Phrag control technique. As it stands, we've got more than 40,000 acres of Phragmites around the Great Salt Lake. Along with drought, Phragmites invasion represents the biggest threat to our wetlands. I sure hope that the research being conducted here and in other major wetland areas across the country can find options to recovering our native marshes. In the meantime, I'm working on being able to better appreciate the views this grass creates.